Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Today, we are diving into some mind-blowing stories, 15 of the biggest lies ever told about America's first families. We are talking about scandalous secrets, massive cover-ups, and shocking conspiracies that could change the way you look at some of the most powerful families in US history. From presidents hiding affairs and secret children to massive political lies that lasted decades, these stories are not only unbelievable but also dangerous, because these lies shaped the way history was written, and the truth wasn't always what we were told. So buckle up, because the truth is about to get a whole lot stranger than fiction. And trust me, you won't want to miss a single second of this. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button, and let's get into it. 1. Thomas Jefferson and the Sally Hemings affair. Alright, let's kick things off with a truly shocking story from the past, and it involves none other than Thomas Jefferson, one of America's founding fathers. We all know Jefferson for his role in writing the Declaration of Independence and his presidency, but what about the story that's been hidden in plain sight for centuries? For years, people denied that Jefferson had any kind of relationship with Sally Hemings, one of his slaves. There were whispers, sure, but the official narrative, pushed by many historians, was that Jefferson and Hemings were not involved in any romantic relationship. Some even tried to claim that it wasn't his children she had, but maybe some other male relative of Jefferson's. But hold on, in the 1990s, a major revelation came to light. Through DNA testing, it was confirmed that Thomas Jefferson did father several children with Sally Hemings. That's right, the official history, the one many people held onto for centuries, was all a lie. This wasn't just a personal affair, it was an uncomfortable, painful chapter in America's history, a story of power, inequality, and, quite frankly, a pretty significant lie that had been buried for years. How did the lie persist for so long? Part of it had to do with the status of Sally Hemings and the fact that Jefferson was a revered figure. No one wanted to tarnish the image of one of the greatest political minds in US history, so the family tried to keep this scandal out of the public eye. But the truth eventually came out, through science, no less. And it turned out that one of the most revered figures in US history had a deeply controversial and painful legacy. This whole situation raises questions about how often the stories we've been told, especially when it comes to powerful figures, are skewed or outright fabricated to fit the narrative of the time. In this case, Jefferson's lies about his relationship with Sally Hemings are no longer a secret, but the truth is still shocking, even today. 2. Warren G. Harding and his secret daughter. Now, let's move on to a president who's often overlooked, Warren G. Harding, the 29th President of the United States. He had a scandalous presidency, but one of the most bizarre parts of his life was the secret daughter he had with a woman named Nan Britton. For years, Harding's family denied the existence of his daughter, but here's the crazy part. DNA testing later confirmed that Harding was, in fact, the father of Nan Britton's daughter. For decades, the public was told that Harding's relationships were beyond reproach, but this scandal was one of the biggest secrets in American politics. You might wonder how something like this could remain a secret for so long. Well, the answer lies in the timing. Harding was president during a time when the media was far more controlled, and many of his personal issues were swept under the rug by his political allies. But the truth always has a way of coming out, and in Harding's case, it came out years after his death. Harding's affair with Britton and the subsequent birth of their daughter remained a well-kept secret during his presidency. But once Britton published her book detailing the affair, the scandal couldn't be hidden anymore. The public was shocked to learn the truth, and the Harding family had no choice but to admit the lie. It's strange to think about how presidents, despite all their power and influence, still fall prey to the most basic human flaws. Harding, like so many before him, tried to keep a secret that, in the end, was too big to conceal. The public was stunned, but this scandal highlights a deeper truth, that the lies we tell to protect our image are often the ones that come back to haunt us the most. 3. Bill Clinton and the body count conspiracy. Next up, let's talk about a president who has been at the center of some of the most bizarre conspiracy theories in US history, Bill Clinton. Now, everyone knows about Monica Lewinsky and the impeachment scandal, but there's a far darker conspiracy theory that surrounded Clinton during and after his presidency. This one's a doozy, the so-called Clinton body count. The theory suggests that Bill and Hillary Clinton were responsible for the deaths of dozens of people who were allegedly connected to their political career. The conspiracy claims that these individuals were murdered to silence them or protect the Clintons from scandal. People believe that Clinton had a hand in these mysterious deaths, and this theory spread like wildfire, particularly among conservative circles. But here's the kicker. There's absolutely no evidence to back up these claims. Despite this, the theory gained traction because it played on people's fears about power and corruption. The theory was so widespread that it even spawned entire websites and books devoted to exposing the Clintons' supposed involvement in these deaths. So, how did this all get started? It likely stemmed from the tragic deaths of people associated with the Clintons during the 1990s, including several of their political allies. These deaths were highly publicized, but instead of being seen as coincidences, they became the fuel for a conspiracy machine. What's truly bizarre is how long this myth persisted, with people still believing in it despite the complete lack of credible evidence. This entire theory is an example of how easily people can be manipulated by their fears and how conspiracy theories often thrive on half-truths and innuendo. The Clinton body count myth is one of the strangest and most persistent lies in US political history, and it shows just how powerful misinformation can be when it taps into public paranoia. 4. Barack Obama and the birther myth. Let's talk about Barack Obama and one of the most outrageous conspiracy theories to ever come out of modern US politics, the birther myth. This myth spread like wildfire, with people claiming that Obama wasn't born in the US and, therefore, wasn't eligible to be president. The theory was propagated by none other than Donald Trump, who for years pushed the narrative that Obama was secretly born in Kenya and was hiding his birth certificate. Despite Obama releasing his long-form birth certificate in 2011, the myth refused to die, largely due to the relentless promotion of the lie by Trump and his supporters. So, where did this myth come from? It's simple: racism and political discontent. Some people couldn't accept that a black man could be president, so they latched onto this theory as a way to delegitimize his presidency. It became a full-fledged lie that persisted for years, even though the truth was right in front of them. The birther movement is a reminder of just how dangerous lies can be in politics, especially when they play on people's biases and fears. It's one of the most bizarre, persistent lies in modern political history, and the fact that it took so long to be put to rest is a testament to how powerful misinformation can be, especially when it has a willing audience. 5. Donald Trump and the election fraud claims. And of course, we can't leave out Donald Trump, who has perpetuated one of the biggest lies of all, the claim that the 2020 presidential election was rigged. For months after his loss to Joe Biden, Trump and his supporters spread unfounded claims that the election was stolen through widespread voter fraud. The problem? There was no evidence of widespread fraud. Every recount and court case dismissed the allegations. Yet, Trump continued to push the narrative, even leading to the Capitol riots on January 6, 2021. The idea that the election was rigged became the rallying cry for many of his followers, despite the complete lack of proof. This lie has been one of the most damaging to American democracy, as it undermines trust in the electoral system and promotes political violence. The fallout from Trump's false claims continues to ripple through the political landscape, as many still believe that the election was fraudulent, even though all the facts point in the opposite direction. Trump's claims about election fraud represent a bizarre distortion of truth and have forever altered the political discourse in America. It's one of the most blatant lies in U.S. presidential history, and its effects are still being felt today. 6. Lyndon B. Johnson and the Johnson treatment myth. Next up is Lyndon B. Johnson, the 36th president, a man whose larger-than-life personality often overshadowed his policies. Known for his forceful nature and political shrewdness, LBJ also had a reputation for using what became known as the Johnson treatment, a method of intimidating or strong-arming people into doing his bidding. But here's where the myth gets strange. Many people believe that LBJ used threats and coercion to bend Congress to his will, including allegedly intimidating his colleagues into submission with physical force and strong language. The truth? While LBJ's methods were certainly aggressive, they weren't quite as sinister as the stories often portrayed. The Johnson treatment was actually just his style of persuasion, and while it was intense, it wasn't about threatening people with violence. LBJ was known for his close, sometimes uncomfortable proximity to others during conversations, often getting right in their faces and using his height to make himself the center of attention. It was all about pressure, charisma, and sheer persistence, not threats. That said, LBJ's method of getting what he wanted was certainly intense, and it sometimes included using his knowledge of personal lives, vulnerabilities, and relationships to leverage support. It wasn't exactly ethical, but it wasn't the tyrannical approach many myths would have you believe. This story of aggressive political tactics has been exaggerated over time, but it's clear that Johnson's ability to maneuver people in Washington with his distinct style was one of the most unique and bizarre political tools in history. 7. Franklin D. Roosevelt and the polio conspiracy. Let's take a look at Franklin D. Roosevelt, one of the most beloved and influential U.S. presidents. FDR led the country through the Great Depression and World War II, but there's a bizarre conspiracy theory that's persisted for decades. The theory? That Roosevelt's battle with polio wasn't really polio at all. Instead, some theorists claimed that Roosevelt's paralysis was a cover-up for a mysterious illness, possibly something more sinister. Now, let's be clear, this theory is totally false. Roosevelt did suffer from polio, and the evidence for this is overwhelming. But what's curious is how deeply some people wanted to believe there was something more to his condition. The idea of a president being paralyzed and hiding it seemed too incredible for some, and over the years, rumors about other illnesses began to take root. So why did these rumors persist? For some, it's the idea that a man of such political stature couldn't possibly be so vulnerable. FDR's refusal to show his disability in public, even though it was widely known, led some to speculate that there was something he was trying to hide. But the fact remains, Roosevelt's polio was real, and the conspiracy theories about his condition were just another bizarre and unfounded attempt to rewrite history. 8. Richard Nixon and the Watergate tapes lie. Richard Nixon, perhaps one of the most well-known presidents when it comes to political scandal, was also involved in one of the most bizarre presidential lies in history. We are all familiar with Watergate, the political scandal that led to Nixon's resignation. But what about the secret tapes he made during his time in office? These tapes became central to the scandal, but there's an interesting lie here, that Nixon tried to completely cover up the recordings and their contents. The tapes revealed Nixon's involvement in the cover-up of the break-in at the Democratic National Committee headquarters in 1972. But the lie about the tapes wasn't about their existence. It was about the contents. Nixon and his aides tried to deny the tapes existed or tried to destroy them before they could be released. But in reality, Nixon had recorded almost everything in the White House, including conversations with his closest advisors about his political enemies and his fears about losing control. What's bizarre about this is that Nixon's paranoia and his belief that he could control the narrative through secrecy played such a huge role in his downfall. The truth was that the tapes didn't really contain much new information. They were just proof of Nixon's complicity. And yet, the efforts to hide them became a major lie that only made the scandal worse. In the end, the tapes were released, and they revealed not only Nixon's involvement in the cover-up, but also just how much he tried to manipulate the public's perception of his presidency. It's one of the most strange and ironic aspects of the Watergate scandal, that the tapes themselves were never the real problem, but Nixon's attempts to erase the truth only made it worse. 9. Theodore Roosevelt and the Bear Story Lie. Now, let's talk about Theodore Roosevelt, the 26th president, famous for his love of adventure and his larger-than-life persona. There's a story that's been passed down through generations that Roosevelt once fought a bear with his bare hands while on a hunting trip. It sounds like something straight out of a movie, right? The president facing off against a wild animal with nothing but his strength? Here's the catch. The bear fight never happened like that. While Roosevelt did famously refuse to shoot a bear during a hunting trip, the bear wasn't actually in danger. It was a young, captured bear that was tied up for the hunt, and Roosevelt chose not to shoot it. The story was later exaggerated and twisted by the press to make Roosevelt seem like a fearless, rugged hero who could fight off a bear on his own. The idea of a president battling a bear was too good to resist, and the press played into it, creating a myth that has stuck around for years. Roosevelt's actual adventure was still brave and daring, but the bear fight was nothing more than a wild story made up to enhance his image. This story is a perfect example of how the press can create larger-than-life legends, and how easily people will believe a myth when it fits the narrative they want to hear. 10. Grover Cleveland and the Secret Surgery Lie. Let's jump to Grover Cleveland, the only president to serve 2 non-consecutive terms. In 1893, Cleveland underwent a secret surgery to remove a cancerous tumor from his mouth. But here's the kicker. He had the operation on a yacht, far away from the prying eyes of the public and the press. The surgery was kept completely secret for months, and the story wasn't revealed to the public until after the operation was over. Why keep it secret? Cleveland feared that if the public found out, it would undermine their confidence in his leadership, especially during a financial crisis. For decades, the story was covered up, with the Cleveland family and his doctors doing everything they could to keep it under wraps. The truth didn't come out until much later, and when it did, it raised questions about how far presidents will go to protect their image. But the lie wasn't about the surgery itself. It was about the complete secrecy and the fact that Cleveland tried to hide such an important part of his personal life from the American people. 11. John F. Kennedy and the UFO interests myth. Let's move on to John F. Kennedy, a president who was beloved by many, yet also surrounded by his fair share of bizarre stories. One of the most intriguing myths about Kennedy was his supposed obsession with UFOs. It's widely believed that JFK was secretly fascinated with extraterrestrial life and even asked the CIA and military to share their UFO files with him. While many dismissed this as just another conspiracy theory, the idea that the president was deeply interested in UFOs was widely discussed in the media and among the American public. According to some reports, Kennedy even requested secret briefings on UFO sightings and phenomena during his time in office. These claims grew into a legend that suggested Kennedy was preparing for some sort of disclosure about extraterrestrial life. But the truth is much less exciting. While Kennedy may have been curious about UFOs, There's no definitive evidence that he had any special interest in them beyond the usual presidential curiosity about national security matters. The UFO narrative likely arose from rumors and the atmosphere of the 1960s, when the UFO phenomenon was at its height. The idea that the president was involved in a secret investigation into alien life turned out to be a wild exaggeration. But like many of the lies surrounding public figures, this one stuck around. The UFO myth surrounding Kennedy is a fascinating example of how conspiracy theories can gain traction, especially when they tap into the public's fascination with the unknown. Despite the lack of evidence, the story of JFK's alleged interest in UFOs remains one of the more bizarre myths attached to his presidency. 12. John F. Kennedy Jr. and the Secret Child. Moving on to another member of the Kennedy family, we have John F. Kennedy Jr., a beloved figure who tragically passed away in a plane crash in 1999. For years, there were whispers about Kennedy Jr. having a secret child, a theory that captivated both the media and the public. Some claimed that he had fathered a child with an anonymous woman and that the Kennedy family had kept it hidden from the public. Here's where the story gets strange. Despite numerous rumors, no evidence has ever surfaced to support these claims. In fact, the Kennedy family has always denied the existence of any such child. So, where did this myth come from? It likely grew out of the intense scrutiny the Kennedy family faced, along with their well-known penchant for secrecy. Kennedy Jr., as a highly visible public figure, was often the subject of rumors, and his personal life was frequently the target of speculation. But despite all the attention, the secret child story never held up under scrutiny, and it remains one of the more salacious, yet untrue, tales about the Kennedys. It's a reminder of how public figures, especially those as famous as the Kennedys, can be victims of their own celebrity. Rumors about secret children, hidden relationships, and other juicy details seem to follow them wherever they go, even if, in this case, there's no truth to them. 13. Harry S. Truman and the Truman Show conspiracy. Let's wrap things up with Harry S. Truman, one of the lesser-known presidents but one whose life has been the subject of a strange conspiracy theory that's still floating around today. Some people believe Truman's entire life, and even his presidency, was part of a massive social experiment. That's right. Some conspiracy theorists suggest that Truman was essentially part of a real-life reality TV show designed to control public opinion and manipulate the media. The theory is wild, to say the least, claiming that Truman was chosen for his role as president because he was easily manipulated and was placed in the Oval Office as part of an experiment to see how a reality show-style presidency could unfold. The idea is that Truman's presidency, decisions, and personal life were all manufactured to test public reactions and the power of media control. Of course, there's absolutely no evidence to support this theory, but it's one of those bizarre stories that has gained a certain amount of traction among conspiracy enthusiasts. The idea of a president being a puppet in a grand social experiment sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi novel. But for some, it's a theory that taps into their distrust of the political system and the media. While the Truman Show conspiracy is just that, a conspiracy, it speaks to the fascination people have with controlling narratives and how history is shaped. Truman's legacy is far more grounded in real-world politics, but the idea that his presidency was a social experiment adds a strange layer to his story. 14. Jimmy Carter's brother Billy and the Libyan conspiracy. Now, let's talk about Jimmy Carter's younger brother, Billy Carter. He wasn't as famous as the president, but Billy was at the center of a bizarre conspiracy theory that tied him to the Libyan government. Billy Carter, a well-known character in his own right, had some controversial business dealings during his brother's presidency, particularly with Muammar Gaddafi, the leader of Libya. In the late 1970s, Billy was involved in a business venture with Libyan officials, and his ties to Gaddafi raised a lot of eyebrows. Some conspiracy theorists went even further, claiming that Billy was secretly working as a spy for Libya, or even that he was in on some sort of international political scheme. In reality, Billy Carter was just a man who enjoyed the limelight and got caught up in a strange mix of business and politics. While his ties to the Libyan regime were controversial, the idea that he was involved in some grand conspiracy to undermine US politics is a stretch at best. Billy's actions were simply bizarre, but there's no evidence of a larger plot. This story shows how even the most eccentric members of political families can become the subject of wild and completely unfounded theories. Billy Carter's involvement with Libya was strange enough, but the myth that he was involved in a conspiracy is a prime example of how rumors can spiral out of control. 15. Chelsea Clinton and the drug rumors. Finally, we end with a lesser-known story about Chelsea Clinton, the only child of Bill and Hillary Clinton. Throughout her childhood and early adulthood, Chelsea was under constant public scrutiny, and with that came the usual media rumors. One of the more persistent rumors was that Chelsea struggled with drugs and alcohol during her teenage years. There were tabloids and gossip columns that suggested Chelsea had a difficult time growing up in the public eye, with some even claiming she had a serious addiction problem. However, these stories were largely exaggerated or simply false. While it's true that Chelsea faced the pressures of being in the spotlight, there is no evidence to support the claims that she had a substance abuse problem. The rumors about Chelsea Clinton's personal life are a great example of how public figures, especially children of high-profile politicians, are subjected to intense media pressure. While some stories may have had a kernel of truth, most of them were just part of the false narrative that often surrounds first families.